Welcome everybody to our open speaker meeting. This is the Came to Believe group of Alcoholics Anonymous, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. And this is our open speaker meeting agenda. We'd like to open the meeting with a moment of silence followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We are so glad you are here, especially newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussion to their problems with alcohol. And this is the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA memberships. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And I'm Jamie Burnett. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jamie.
My sobriety date is February 17th, 2015. I have asked two readers to come up and open up the meeting with how it works in the 12 traditions.
Hello, my name's Rhonda Reed and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Rhonda.
My sobriety date is May 15th, 2008. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaim, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if He were sought.
Hi there, my name is Frank. I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is August 15, 2015, and the Came to Believe group is my home group. The tradition, the AA tradition, to those now in its fold, Alcoholics Anonymous has made the difference between misery and sobriety, and often the difference between life and death. AA can, of course, mean just as much to uncounted alcoholics not yet reached. Therefore, no society of men and women ever had a more urgent need for continuous effectiveness and permanent unity. We alcoholics see that we must work together and hang together, else most of us will finally die alone. The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous are, we AAs believe, the best answers that our experience has yet given to those ever-urgent questions. How can AA best function, and how can AA best stay whole and so survive? The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. 1. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2. For our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a living God, as He may express Himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. 3. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5. Each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6. An AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8. Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9. AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10. Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence, the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11. Our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
I'd like to thank Rhonda and Frank for opening our meeting with our readings. This time I'd like to tell you about our Came to Believe meeting schedule. We are one group that meets twice a week. We meet in our choir room, which is just a little bit over to the side of this building. We meet on Tuesday nights, and we have closed meetings from 7 to 8 p.m. The first, second, and third Tuesdays we read from the Big Book, cover to cover. It takes a little over 2 years. The fourth Tuesday, we read a tradition that correlates with that month. And on fifth Tuesday, if there happens to be one, we study a history lesson. We also meet on Fridays. Our first Fridays are closed meetings. We also meet in the choir room there from 7 to 8 p.m. They're closed discussion meetings using AA-approved literature that's chosen by the chairperson. The last Friday, it's where we are tonight, is our only open meeting. It's a speaker meeting. And we start with fellowship in this room at 6:30, and our speaker starts a little after 7. This is an open meeting, and that's for anyone desiring to attend. We are glad that you are all here. I'm going to let Paige do the introduction for the speaker. I want to thank Sarah for weathering the storm to come out here and share her story.
Thank you, Jenny. Good evening. My name is Paige Wood. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety birthday is March the 31st, 1989. And I've had the pleasure of knowing our speaker since she was a little girl. It's been a long time. And she came to us when she was very young, and she was a source of joy watching her come around and start to get sober and become the lady that she is today. Quite an exceptional member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, I know that some of you know her already, and you're looking forward to hearing her story again. We love to hearing it. And so, I invite Sarah to the podium.
My name is Sarah Nemechek, and I'm an alcoholic. It's nice to be here tonight. It's nice to have people to talk to. I appreciate all of you coming out and being here tonight. I want to thank Paige for asking me to speak. It's an honor and a privilege to do anything for Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's also an honor and a privilege to do something, for Paige, and I hold the same regard for Chuck and for Jerry and for many of you in this room. But I've known these three since I got sober, and so it's just really, they're very, there's people in this room that I really appreciate. So it's an honor and a privilege to be a part of continuing this thing. Something that I receive and being a part of continuing to pass it on. So, let's see, I told you I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the Primary Purpose Group of Durham. We meet on Tuesday and Friday nights at 7:30. We have our closed meeting on Tuesdays. We have our open meeting on Fridays. We have a similar format to what you described, just in different order. So we do have a workshop tonight, and I'm missing it, but I've got people, that's my service position too, and I committed to Paige so many months ago and I didn't know. So I got their speakers, but I'm just not there. But she's being nice about it. So anyway, let's see, my sobriety date is December 24th, 1998, and just so happy to have a sobriety date and happy to be a different woman than the woman who walked in here. That's what Sandy, that's one of the things I remember. Sandy was my first sponsor, and she always said that. I'm not the same woman who walked through these doors, and I'm definitely not the same woman who walked through these doors. So just because of what Alcoholics Anonymous has done in my life, I'm a different person today. And one of the ladies that I used to go to the jail with in Durham, she would say this, I'm not taking, it's her, I heard it from her, but like we do in AA, we hear it from other people, but she said that Alcoholics Anonymous has given her the opportunity to live two lives, two polar opposite lives that should not happen in the same person, but two lives in one. And it's very true, that's my experience here. So I'm going to tell you in a general way what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like as a result of having come into contact and become a member in good standing of Alcoholics Anonymous, and having worked the steps and applied sponsorship. So I'm going to tell you what I'm like today as a result of applying and having all, as Dean would say, having all the jets of AA on. Okay, so I'm originally from Wilson, so I feel at home here in Rocky Mount. I did a lot of growing up here in Rocky Mount around the corner. I even almost rode horses on this property or in this area. So had my first drink in Rocky Mount. I'll get to that in just a second. So I feel very at home here in this part of the state. I may have a flat tire on my van, and so if so, my parents just live, almost in Elm City, so I'm very close to Relief if I need to stay there tonight. So, and I'm having a good relationship with my parents today because of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they know that they probably do have some mixed feelings about me being out in this weather tonight, but I've already texted them upon arrival, like that's the kind of person, that's the kind of daughter I am today. Rhonda saw me pull up, and I sat in my car and I was telling my mom and dad I got here safely, but I may need to ask for a rescue a little later. But anyway, so I'm originally from Wilson. I'm from a great family. My dad may be what our literature may have referred to as having some problem drinking early in his life, but he did not turn out to be an alcoholic. I don't really remember the years when he had problems with his drinking, but I've heard stories about him, and my mom, I think, just kind of had to lay down the law, and given a good reason, he was able to stop or moderate. And so, but I didn't grow up seeing that. I had two great parents. I was raised in church and had a good experience with that. I went to Catholic school here in Rocky Mount at OLPH. I wanted to be a nun when I was little. I had a good introduction to. I know people who know me and how I turned out are laughing because I really just turned out to be a fallen woman, and not a nun. But I had a good introduction to the concept of God and a relationship with God. I was a kid that was uncomfortable in my skin. I was angry. I was fearful, just so fearful of everything. The earliest memories I have of my life are of fear, of not being able to sleep at night. I'm the kind of person that would have so much fear in social settings that I would just shake. My body would just be consumed by just shaking. And so I've had a lot of isms, and I was uncomfortable in my own skin as far back as I could remember. But I was raised in a good family and had a good introduction to God, and I was introduced to a concept of God that would work in those moments of fear, even as a child. When I couldn't sleep, and all the what-ifs of life would be running through my head. What if the house burns down? What if my parents die? What about, I remember learning about nuclear war in school, and I just couldn't stop fear from gripping me and controlling me. And I would be able to tap into a power greater than myself, a God of my understanding, even at that young age, and be able to have some relief. And so I was a competitive swimmer growing up. I laugh, and sometimes there have been moments where my kids have complained about their athletic involvement. I'm like, y'all don't know what that athletic involvement is. I was a competitive swimmer. I was swimming 2 hours a day at your age, every day of the week, and competing every weekend, and getting to the point where I was going to do it twice a day, like before school in the morning. I was great. I was state champion. In a number of events, nationally ranked, and was being approached by colleges, by the time I started drinking. And then it all went down from there. So, but I was committed to athletics. I was committed to academics. I'm from a family. My dad was one of 11 from a farm family in Kansas. I was given a lot of Midwestern large family values. That's how I was raised, and they're great values. I love them. I did grow up here in the South, but I was given a lot of good morals and principles and values by my parents. And academics, among many different character values that I was given, academics were very important to my dad. It was this way that he was successful coming out of a family of 11, So he kind of imposed that upon me, and I did well academically. I was a kid that had a lot of potential. Unfortunately, I already had, alcoholism kind of the roots of alcoholism established in me, and so my potential was not able to fully manifest, obviously, with alcohol already kind of happening. I did have my first drink when I was 13 or 14 years old in this vicinity, maybe in kind of the Red Oak vicinity, and so I was working at a horse farm. I was a camp counselor, and I was in those years. Many of you who have older children understand those years of being a taxi driver. That's just all I do nowadays, like get my kids from one place to another. And they were in that little age. I was in that age where my parents were kind of getting comfortable letting me stay somewhere else. So they let us stay on the farm that week while we were working as a counselor. And we would get up, so they wouldn't have to drive us back and forth every day. And so it was in one of those nights while I was doing that summer job that I was introduced to alcohol. And it was, for me, it was a magical experience. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was a kid that was uncomfortable in my own skin. I was very shy. I was very timid. I was running with these two girls that I compared myself to, and I fell so short to them. I had the before pictures of acne. I had such bad acne. I looked like before pictures of Proactive, and I just really was not someone that knew how to live life comfortably. And I walked to other girls, and they seemed to. And I was running with those girls, and some older kids bought some alcohol, and I remember there was a pack of 4, and we each got one. And I remember the ease and comfort that I got from taking that drink into my system. I remember it was like I had been holding my breath my whole life, and I just finally relaxed. I felt like I fit in. I had found my bearings. I had found the answer to life, and that I remember that. And it was so clear to me that alcohol was a solution. It appeared to be such a solution for me that I needed more from that very night that I drank. I didn't get falling over drunk. We just didn't have enough. But there were 3 of us girls, there were 4 drinks purchased, and I can promise you I got that 4th drink that was left over. I needed more of whatever that was. And so from the very beginning, my parents didn't drink, but they did have alcohol in the home. They were the very same bottles from their wedding 15 years prior. So I didn't have to water it down to they wouldn't know if the levels had changed or not. But I was a person that just the keen alcoholic mind that I had, I just knew that if alcohol worked that well on a Saturday night, it would work just as well on a Wednesday night, and it would work just as well on a Wednesday morning. And so where some people I've heard in the rooms of AA different stories and different experiences where some people would put rules and limitations on their drinking from the very beginning. I just never put those on there, so I just started out drinking all day long or any time of the day or any day of the week. And Steve from Raleigh, had this little saying that I remember he used to say was that, and may still say, but he said, if you take that morning drink before you need that morning drink, it won't be long before you need that morning drink. And that's how much I drink. And so as I've heard in the rooms by so many other people, after that introduction, every decision that I accepted, every commitment, every event I went to, if I was not currently drinking, I was planning my next drink. I wanted more of that. I was preoccupied with alcohol, with that drink, in between drinks, and it's all I thought of. And so I didn't turn down drinks if I had any choice about it. I had consequences with my drinking from the very beginning, but what it did for me was more noticeable than what it did against me. For a long time, the first consequences that I probably had were with the people that I was drinking with. My behavior was never acceptable when drinking, and from the age of 16, I had already been called an alcoholic by my peers, my drinking buddies. There was something noticeably different about the way that I drank compared to the person beside me. I made it to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 16. It wasn't at the Principles Group of Raleigh, but it was at the Wilson Group because I went to support someone I always drank with older people. I don't know why that was, but I went to support someone who had a drinking problem and convinced her to drink afterwards, as a matter of fact. So I didn't quite get the point yet. But I had consequences, first with the people I was drinking with my family, I lost that swimming, the potential career that I could have had as a swimmer. All the academic opportunities that I had. One time I was given a great internship at an oral surgeon's office, and all the kids prior who had ever gotten these internships went on to become those professions. I was let go from that profession because he told me I was an embarrassment to his practice because of how publicly I lived in my alcoholism and in the small town that I'm from, and the neighborhoods that I ran in with the people that I ran with. It was very noticeable, my lifestyle at that point. And he let me go. And so a lot of doors began to close, but I defended my right to drink, and I only saw things if the world would leave me alone, and if they would let me drink the way that I wanted to. And if this had happened to you when you were a child, you would drink too. And so people didn't understand me. And I did have some things that kind of, from my childhood, that justified my right to be able to block that stuff off and pour me a drink, And I entered into therapy. I was sent away. Around the time, I think I was about 16, I was sent away for the first time to a psych ward in Goldsboro, and I went on a little vacation. I needed a vacation at that point because people were angry at me because of my behavior when drinking. I had people revving their engines in front of my house, threatening me because of things I had done when drinking. And so I needed to get away and let those people calm down a little bit, and so I enjoyed, going away that first time. It was like a little vacation, and so I went back into things, and I just remember that first introduction really was just like a mental health kind of diagnosis, and given some medications. I was told not to drink with those medications, but the good alcoholic I am, had to find out what they would do at least, and so I mixed. I did, and I didn't think anything strange happened, and then after that I was a gypsy. I lived out of the trunk of my car when I was lucky enough to have a car. I never knew what life would hold. Once I took that first drink, all bets were off. I had no way to predict what the evening might hold, but so I kept a little bag ready at all times in case I just never made it, home. Then I always had it with me, and I would just go on these binges. Again, I drank every day, but I drank harder on the days that were not school days, and I would really go hard on the weekends, and then I would just be overcome with remorse and fear of having to go back around my peers and face the stories of what I had done that weekend prior, and I would be so overcome with remorse that I would take extra mental health medication, just thinking it would help me be better prepared to handle that. So I was just all over the spectrum with instability, and I remember a very dark time of depression that I was in at this time too. I couldn't sleep at night. I told you I've always had fear at night. My mind would race at night and think, but it was even more exaggerated as my alcoholism progressed, because I had that restless, irritable, and discontented point of needing another drink, needing the ease and comfort. And so I would hide alcohol in my closet or around the corner, around the fence outside, and in a leaf pile around the corner. And I would go walking at night because I was just that restless, irritable, and discontent. I don't know if y'all have ever seen a young person walking the streets in the middle of the night. I promise you, at this point, I was not even looking for drugs or anything like that. I was just walking the streets. I was so alone in life and lost in life and hopeless that I would just walk. And I remember that I kept a diary at this time, and I compared myself to Anne Frank, who was a Holocaust survivor. And that was my perception of just how sad of an existence that I had and how bad of a life. And I thought, I'm going to die this tragic death one day, and the whole world's going to find my journal and say, poor girl, And that was how I was living. I was so consumed with just self-pity and self-centeredness, and I could only see, the world through my perspective. And so, which was a very distorted perspective. I went to that first psych ward. I got out. I continued to drink. It got progressively worse. My progression was very rapid. By this time, you know, those moments of walking the streets became more involved moments of walking the streets. I ended up, there were many times I'd be kicked out of my house. I was very aggressive when denied alcohol. I would fight, I would rage, and some nights I would run away, and some nights they would kick me out. And I I would walk the streets. I'm a country girl. I'm not afraid to sleep outside. And so I did do that many nights. I slept in auto garage doorways, and I slept in, like little picnic shelters that have like triangle roofs. And sometimes if you put a board across those, you can get up in there and just have this nice little protected place and I always remember from the principal's group of Wilson that the heat came out of that vent at the bottom of the stairs. And I always remembered stuff like that. Like if I ever need to sleep outside in the winter, I could go to somewhere like, I noticed stuff like that. Today, I noticed stuff like that. If I ever need to sleep outside, that would be a great place to do it. Some things just never go away, right? But life progressively got worse, and I began to have more experiences like that, and more of those times where I would draw a line in the sand, and I would say, if it ever gets this bad, I'll reconsider, I'll stop, or I'll change. And as I got to that place that I had at one time said was unacceptable and was of poor moral standard, when I got there, it didn't feel like anything was really wrong with that. And so I erased that line in the sand that I had drawn and drew it out farther and just began to progress and fall and fall and fall more and more and more into the depths of alcoholism and of despair and of loneliness and hopelessness. And so a year from there, I had this knack of ruining holidays for my family. And so this year, right before Thanksgiving of '98, I ended up going out one night, and I remember that someone else was driving, but they ended up wrecking my car, and I was in the passenger seat, and I don't know about, it's all kind of blending, but I ended up getting sent away again. Let me back up a little bit. I got sent away again when I was still a minor. My parents wanted to intervene, they wanted to do everything they could to help me because they were so terrified for me. They wanted to know that while they still had legal power to take action, they wanted to do so. So before I turned 18, they ended up having me sent away to a long-term adolescent transitional living center, kind of like a group home setting. And I lived in Stanford until I turned 18, and that's where I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. I should mention that. But I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was not. It was run by the people that I think you guys knew at that time. I remember you guys maybe talking. But it was heavily based on Alcoholics Anonymous. We would read a daily reflection every day, and we would study the 12 and 12, and we would study the big book, and we had to go to meetings every day. And part of the program was to get a sponsor, like a lot of programs that some of us will go to nowadays. And so I was in this program, and I was fighting it because I have been exposed to the drug lifestyle, but I didn't partake that much because I was always crazy enough without that stuff. There were certain things that I knew that if I ever did, I would never come back. I was just already that crazy. And then the other thing, there were a lot of reasons, but I was convinced that because I had not done all the substances that all these other kids had done in the program that I was in, because I hadn't done those, I was therefore not as bad as those other kids. So one day I went to the director of the program and I proceeded to tell him, that I think that they've made a big mistake. I do not think that I need to be here. I haven't done all these things that these kids have done, and I think that I should be able to go home. And he proceeded to tell me that the degree to which that my alcoholism had settled into my thinking, the degree to which the state of mind had already been fully established, the thinking of an alcoholic had been established in my mind, was much farther advanced than any of the other people there. And he also told me one more thing. He said that the person trying hardest to not be the alcoholic is often the worst one. And so, that was me. I was trying to, maybe you guys can identify with this, but I was trying to think of any night where I had turned down drinks, or any night that I had drank successfully, or any night, I was just trying to think, I was scraping for reasons to prove them wrong. But yet I was just I was almost teased by those statements in the big book when they would talk about, if you doubt your condition, go out and try some practice drinking. I felt teased, like they knew that I was one of them. They were just picking on me or teasing me. But I knew that I was I was an alcoholic. From the very first time I was introduced to AA literature, I understood the Jaywalker long before they had that little part. I remember the day I read it. And before they got to the part, if you just substitute alcoholism for jaywalking, you'll understand completely. I was already there. I didn't even have to read that line to understand it. That was my story exactly. And so after I'd gone to this director and told him I thought I needed to go home, he obviously said I needed to stay more than the rest of them. So I said, well, gosh, I'm going to show him then. I'm going to fake it. I'm going to tell him what he wants to hear. I'm going to show him what he wants to see, and I'm going to get out of here early. And so I let my guard down, and I think in my efforts to try to fake the program, the truth came in. The seed was effectively planted of Alcoholics Anonymous. I did get a sponsor. She came in from the outside and worked with me. I'm sure that's what fed my desire to one day take the message to people who are confined in facilities, because someone did that for me at one time. And even though I was doing a halfway, attempt at Alcoholics Anonymous, I did get some results from it. Some of the promises, they're not all, I know not to expect all of them, but some of the things, my life got better. Removing alcohol, it got better. And I remember that I did begin to change. I restored my relationship at that point to some degree with my family. And I began to have a sense of confidence, and I felt good. And I even, I experienced some of the benefits of the program, even without having a full commitment to practicing it. So I began to make my home visits. That's where I met Paige and Chuck and Jerry and a lot of the people in Wilson. And I made my home visits, and I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous on the outside before I was released to the outside. And I was finally released, and I began to come to meetings. But what I noticed what was lacking now today is that I wasn't completely desperate. I hadn't reached a place where I couldn't imagine life with or without alcohol. I still had an attraction to that vicarious pleasure, the lifestyle. I felt I had been cheated, good years of drinking, because, I had finally turned 18 years old, and I thought that I had been robbed good years of drinking. I was so jealous of people who got to drink for 30 years. I just thought, I was denied those good years drinking. And so I just had a lot of, the mind of an alcoholic began to talk to me. It began, those little voices, those little lies that began to float through the mind. And at first they're very quiet, and I don't voice them. I just think them to myself, and I fight them on my own power, which I eventually realize is lacking. It grows and grows and grows and get bigger. I told you I felt better, my life was going better. I could even get to the point, even much like our literature talks about, that I could criticize other people who were worse off than me at that point. And it's like I'm just opening the door for it to happen to me again. That's if I ever talk bad about people, it's almost like I'm in that same position just a little bit later. So little did I know, one day I had already gotten comfortable around places where drinking was done. I had no problem initially turning it down, but I went there enough times that one day, without realizing it, I ended up drinking. I didn't see it coming, but I saw it after I had done it immediately. I said, oh my gosh, I put it in my body. I've messed up. It's a white chip. What do I do? And my very next thought, just like laid out in the literature, an example of it, one of the stories was that, well, I've already messed up. I might as well make a good go at it. I told you I'd been denied good years of drinking. So I thought that I deserved to have like 10 more years at least. So I decided that very day, after, oh, that's a white chip, the very next thought is, well, I might as well make a good go at it. I'm going to go back out. I'm going to drink for 10 more years, and I'll come back to Alcoholics Anonymous when I'm 28 years old, and I'll have plenty of time to restart my life. And every time I say that, I hear two things. Number one, I knew you were my people. I knew that I would come back to you if I could make it. If I lived to come back to you, I would come back to you. I love that I recognize in Alcoholics Anonymous a couple things that really attracted me in Alcoholics Anonymous. One was that in the groups that I got sober in, we don't shoot our wounded. And I was not picked on. I was a person that did not know how to stand up for myself my whole life. I was picked on my whole life. And I remember that I didn't get that here in AA. It just touched my heart. I remember that. I remember another thing that really touched me about people is that I couldn't scare them. I can scare school counselors if I tell them the truth about what I'm doing. I can scare them. I can scare sweet church people, good intentioned church people. Oh my gosh, if I ever told them the truth, they were just backing away. And then another thing too is that I remember that people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous talked about things from personal experience. That they talked about things that only a person would know had they lived those experiences. And that hit home to me, the language of the heart, the identification. And I love that about Alcoholics Anonymous. So many things that I did. So I knew you were my people, and I knew I would come back to you if I could, but just give me 10 years. And I have plenty of time to restart my life. And when I say that I restart my life, I truly do. I'm not a functional drinker. I lose everything when drinking. My only goal every day upon waking up is to find a drink, to find that ease and comfort, to not face the overwhelming fears and responsibilities of life. That was how I drank. And my aspiration at that time of life were one of two things that may seem offensive to say so, but my ambitions in life were to get a man or multiple men lined up that would pay for my drinking, and or get a government check coming in that would pay for me to drink every day all day long. And that's all I lived for. And that's all I wanted in life, was just to be able to support my drinking. And so I returned to drinking. And I said, well, I'm going to go out for 10 more years, and I didn't make it 10 years. I made it all of 3 months, and I came in crawling on my knees. It was a horrible return to drinking. This is where I most significantly remember, like I referred to earlier, that I ruined family holidays. It was this Thanksgiving, right before Thanksgiving '98. Someone wrecked my car, wedged it into a train track. The 2 back wheels were up in the air. The front ones, they had to stop the trains. I mean, I don't know if you guys know, like when I do things big when I relapse. It's not just this little story, it's something big. And so I go to jail, though, that night. My parents told me I could stay where I was, that they could sleep at night knowing where I was. You can stay there and wait for your court date. We are done. And I couldn't get out for a while. I had this secured versus unsecured bond. I couldn't get out for a while. Finally was able to get out. And I remember just coming home to them, and I remember seeing sadness in their eyes and seeing just disappointment. Like, here she is, and we've got to keep living with this. I remember sneaking in, kind of laying down on the side in a little mudroom that we've got before going into the main part of our house, where we would kick off boots and stuff like that. And I just laid down there and waited for them to come home from church that Sunday morning they got out of jail. And it was a disappointment to them to see me. It was heartbreaking for me to see. They were not happy to see me. And so that night that I had gone back out to drinking, I really learned that jaywalker scenario that I had told you about, the times that I had come so close to having serious consequences of my drinking and escaped it. That night had become a very real experience for me. The things that really brought me to my knees this last time in drinking were legal consequences that a good lawyer couldn't fix, and medical consequences that a good doctor couldn't fix, and particularly, bloodborne pathogen risks, and from lifestyle choices that I was living. And as we know, as many of us know, those are very real consequences of today's world. And so I just, really was. I ended up going to jail. I got out, and kind of like Tom and I used to talk about, that next month, after he got out of jail, he lived a month where he just tried to blot. One would think after the consequences that had happened, that one would stop drinking. But I'm not a normal drinker. I drank and tried to blot out the intolerable situation that was at hand, and I ended up coming to AA around Christmas of '98, and the right consequences had happened, the right rearrangements inside of me had happened, where something was different. And I approached Sandy, and I asked her would she be willing to work with me again. I didn't know she would, but she said she would. And she has a real funny way of saying, that I understand the seriousness of the commitment commitment we're entering into when we enter into sponsorship. And she did that with me. And I made a decision coming back to AA this time that I was going to do every suggestion. And even like, when I mean that, I mean like Paige, some of the suggestions, the list of things I was doing every day, the suggestions Paige would give me, like, I was afraid to not do a single one of them. Because, I mean, I had to do every single one. And they can be long lists, but I was so afraid to not do a single thing because AA may not work if I don't take this one suggestion. But I came in here and I decided that I was going to take all the suggestions, and I just wanted to know, I wanted to have a clear conscience that if AA failed me, it wasn't because I hadn't taken full advantage of the program. And so that's what I did coming in here, is that I just made a decision to be all in, both feet in, and almost did it like almost to prove AA wouldn't work, and it worked. And I began to walk through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, led by a sponsor through the Big Book. We participated in a Big Book study early on, I began to. Stephanie and I were talking about one of the things that impacted me most was a third step experience in early sobriety. It was before I had formally gotten this step with my sponsor. And I remember Keith Lewis used to talk about this like a covenant, making a decision with God, a covenant with God. And I remember that life without alcohol was so overwhelming to me. I would wake up gripped with fear every day, overwhelming, not knowing how to face what was in front of me, and normal things tasks that people did every day. I didn't know how to do those things, and I didn't know how to walk through life. And I remember falling to my knees one day in my bedroom and just saying basically the third step prayer without really reading it out of the book, but it was in my own words. And I remember saying, God, if you'll just help me to find a way to live without drinking, I'll give you every experience that I've ever lived through. If you can use those experiences to help someone else, my life is your life. I basically said that. And I just said, if you'll just help me find a way to live. And I would just remember falling to my knees, and one of the earliest promises that I remember seeing coming true in my life were those third step promises when I began to take the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, when I began to trust that God was my creator and God would provide what I needed as long as I stuck close to Him and performed His work well. What I needed began to fall into place. And I remember seeing the promises of the third step come true first in my life, and it gave me so much hope. I'm not a person that naturally likes to look under the rug. I'd rather just push everything under the rug. I, to this day, will have I think my last few 4 steps, I would have a date set for a 4-step, and I will work all night long the night before just to get that thing done. I hate 4-step inventory work, but I resisted doing it, but I did it because I plateaued out on steps 1, 2, and 3 and realized there wasn't any more growth left on that, on just 1, 2, and 3. I did a 4-step. I told you I could scare people if I told them the truth about things that I was living and had done. I had scared a Catholic priest one time trying to do a confession with him, and so I thought I'd scare Sandy. And so I had to test her out, like in Denny's one day over dinner. I just had to drop her something big and just see how she would react. And she was unfazed. She worked in like a closed custody men's prison at that time, I don't know. But I just had to test her, and she could handle it. And so I did my 5th step with her. And then I remember another set of promises coming true after the 5th step, that I could look the world in the eyes again. I remember seeing people from my past. I'd returned to college by that time. And I remember seeing people on campus it was a community college in Wilson, and I remember seeing people from my past and knowing I was a different woman. I was on my way to being a different woman. If I didn't feel it as wholeheartedly as I do today standing before you, I already knew that the process had started there. And then the 6th and 7th step work was very powerful for me, and Paige was a big part of that. I think it was even in this parking lot outside of this church. It was with Pam from Wilson and Paige, and I had gotten sober, but I had not changed some behaviors. So it was kind of like Stacy Steve that we saw recently. She used to always say, when you have a drunken horse thief and you get them sober, you sometimes have a sober horse thief. And I was still doing some unspiritual stuff that were very selfish things that our literature talks about, especially around the sex inventory, as it related to men. And it was very selfish things that I was doing that hurt other people. And but I was just as entangled in that as I was in alcoholism. I couldn't stop. I was just as powerless to get out of it. And I remember, I believe it was right here out in this parking lot, getting honest about what was going on, my powerlessness over it, and I remember just kind of, and the 6 and 7 step for me have almost been parallels to 1 and 2, where I like the 6th step is I become ready, and then 7 is what I'm unable to remove on my own power, that there's a lacking power there. And so that was kind of what happened outside in the parking lot here was that I got honest, and I leaned on the power of people who knew the actions that I needed to take in order for the 6 and 7 step to happen in my life. I had to discontinue certain actions that were bigger than me, that were greater than me, that I couldn't get out of. But with the involvement of members of Alcoholics Anonymous in that process, I was able to get out of it. And after that, my program rocketed. I was able to walk through that. I didn't have to drink again. I was very close to returning to drinking. That was how unspiritual things had become in my life, and how close I had gotten to that world of drinking, and how the guilt that I was living with, knowing I was hurting another person, with how it was affecting me. And I didn't end up drinking again, but my program just really solidified after that point. I stayed single for 5 years. I would go to the women's prison. They'd complain about being in prison and hadn't been with a man in forever, and I could say, honey, I got you beat. I just really did a lot of growing. I went back to school and really focused on my relationship with God, my commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous, on completing the steps, on changing, on figuring out what I like and what I didn't like. In a partner, did a lot of that ideal work, made friendships with people in the program, and eventually ended up getting into a relationship with someone that I had who was a great friend and still is a good friend. We're not in that much contact today for obvious reasons, but they look eyes crossed, but it was a good experience. It was a good learning experience where I was able to form an ideal talked about in the literature and then walk through that. And I began to do a lot of that 8th and 9th step work that repaired those relationships with my parents that I told you about. I remember I came back years later in sobriety. I came back and was able to live with my parents again after having gotten sober, because it was a convenient place for me to go to a college nearby that had a program I was looking for. And it was just an honor and a privilege to be able to re-enter that world and then show them that I was living differently, and they could see that I was living differently. And fast forwarding quite a bit, I'll wait. So I did that. I finally did go to college, and I went and I got my degree in dental hygiene in Goldsboro, next door. I graduated from a college that's next door to the psych ward that I graduated from. And I think that it's God's way. It was God's way of reminding me where I could go back to if I ever didn't. If I didn't stay sober. And I went on to UNC Chapel Hill, and I was able to go to a college that prior to that, like, I was a girl that ran the Roach Motels of 301, you know, and I was able to walk on that prestigious campus and be a part of that community and perform well at that community and be respected by my peers in that community, and it was unbelievable. And I wasn't overcome by the draw and the pull of a college life. It's not like I really ever fit in that world anyway. Like, I was more out of the lower neighborhoods, but I was able to navigate that world and be a part of that world and do well in that world. And I graduated. I am a dental hygienist today. I've been a hygienist for 19 years. I have worked for the same dentist for 19 years. I'm very happy with it. I love it. I know that this profession was handpicked for me. There's a neat little story about how that happened. Working for Skeet Hesmer, Wilson, I got sober, had a year sober. He offered me a part-time temporary job at his little dental office, helping out while Sonny was out pregnant. And it grew into my career by a door opened by a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, by just being willing to walk through a door that I didn't even think would have amounted to anything. Ended up being a door that was to show that my higher power was leading me to a profession that I would have one day. that I'm very good at, that God knew I was good at. I didn't have a clue that I was good at it, but it's been a great profession. I did end up meeting someone else in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. He's a member of Spanish AA, and so we don't overlap as much because it's AA, but it's a little bit apart because of the language. And we've married and we've had 2 children, and so it's been, this profession has been exactly what I needed to be, a very active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, to be able to sponsor a lot of women, to be able to give a lot of time to doing service positions, area service positions in Alcoholics Anonymous, and then being able to raise my children and not having to feel divided between home and profession, and so, but having a beautiful balance between the two. And so it's been a really neat experience. I'm going to close. I'm winding down. But I think that I just want to, I told you that AA has given me a life that 2 lives in one, and this life that I'm living today, AA has given me a life that is so good that it could potentially pull me away from Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's one of the things that motherhood has been a particularly challenging thing for me. Just finding that, I know a lot of us in this room hate that word balance, but like just finding out, how do I stay involved as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and be able to stay sober and be able to stay sane in that household, the way that I interact with my children? How do I do that? And so what's happened is that a lady from Wilmington used to be really involved in prison work. She says, when I was pregnant with my first, she said, Sarah, you're going to have that baby soon, and your AA life is going to change. And she said, you're going to have to adapt with it. But you'll stay a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's going to look different, and it has. And what's been really neat is that I've been able to stay an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous through having children, through raising children. And what's been really neat is that we have this really neat community of moms now that I sponsor, or that I'm a member of a home group that's identified in inventory, that we want to be a safe place for people to come who are family members, and who, if they need to bring their child to a meeting, things like that, we want to offer a place to be able to do that. And so it's been really neat to find this little niche in Alcoholics Anonymous where, as always, like God always does this to me, experiences that I go through, like the 9 Step Promises, prove to be something that God's going to use to help another person one day. And so it's been a great journey. I'm still on that journey. I'm not fixed by any means. Every day, today, I try to be a productive member of society, but yet keep that relationship with my higher power in place, meditate and take that time to get quiet and do that scan of the 6 and 7 step work. How am I doing with those defects that want to rear their head? When I see them crop up, what do I do? There's just the learning of how to do that in Alcoholics Anonymous and living Alcoholics Anonymous. There are times where I feel sad that I can't. Some of my sponsees are single moms who get to do all these book studies and concept studies and all these little things, and I'm just not out of it right now. But what's really been the focus of the last years of my sobriety is learning how to live Alcoholics Anonymous and apply it in every minute of my day and every action of my day. That's what the last years have been for me. And I hope to continue doing what I'm doing and stay here, and then I'll be able to do all those studies, be that old timer who's that older old timer who's at the noon meetings, who goes for lunch and meets sponsees afterwards. And that's, I hope to grow old in Alcoholics Anonymous. So thank you so much for having me tonight, and I look forward to the fellowship after the meeting.